Hi, I'm Madara. I'm a Ph.D. candidate at the University of Waterloo studying Public Health and Gerontology.
Hi, my name is Fahad Sohrab and I study at Tampere University, Finland. I'm a doctoral researcher and I study machine learning and signal processing.
Welcome to Sagacity, Fahad. I know it's quite a bit late over in Finland, so thank you so much for taking time off of your free time to join Sagacity and be part of sharing knowledge.
My pleasure. You're welcome.
I'm really glad to have you here. All right, so let's start with all the questions I have for you. Please tell us what your thesis topic is and what your research is about.
So I try to develop generic methods for something called one-class classification. It's basically an area in machine learning and AI or pattern recognition. And when you train a model for a specific task in the future, in normal machine learning methods, you would need data from all the categories. For example, if it's a binary classification problem, cats and dogs, or you want to identify anomaly or something. So for the training the model, you need data from both classes. But I focus on developing new methods or enhancing the previously proposed methods in this domain, where you would need data only from one category to train the model, and it can be used for a variety of applications. For example, anomaly detection is one of the main sort of application for this kind of problems. But of course, it can be applied to other different applications as well. I've also done some research in emotion recognitions, or also a bit of work in underwater bugs recognition. And in the past, during my master's, I had some works in audio processing for denoising the audio signals and these kind of things. But in my thesis, to be more specific, it's something called subspace support vector data description.
Would you be able to simplify that and maybe give us an example of how these things are applied in real world? So for example, you said one class classification. My PhD is in public health and gerontology. Not a lot of familiarity with that term myself. So could you explain to me and to our audience what that means in the real world? What is being done by using one class classification or machine learning? Or you can be more specific as to what your thesis is about. But basically what I'm trying to get out of you is that how are you seeing what you're doing in real world?
So imagine you have some sort of data which you want to categorize and you want to have a system for that. And in machine learning or AI, what you do is you want to train the system to predict the future events. So these future events can be, for example, category 1 and category 2. Imagine it as Fahad versus non-Fahad. Think of it as financial fraud versus financial okay transaction. Think about it's like cats and dogs. So think about any binary classification problem, abnormal heartbeat versus normal heartbeat, healthy patient versus non-healthy patient. So all these sort of applications, category 1 versus category 2. So you have all the data and you want the system that the system should predict what kind of event happened based on the data you have. So you have a data, let's call them features, and then you have the labels for that. During the training of this system, you need the data and the labels from all the categories. But during the testing, for example, when you want to push the system in real life, then you don't know the labels. So you have the features or the data, and then you feed it to the system, and the system should accurately classify based on that data input. So the simple example is like cats and dogs. So imagine you show the image of a cat to the system, and the system should tell you if it's a cat or not. So this is like a binary classification problem. And now in AI or in machine learning, in the traditional methods, what you do is you need the data from both categories when you want to train this kind of system. So for example, if I would like to train a system which should predict the abnormal heartbeats of humans based on some data from their body, then in the traditional way, traditional binary classification task, I need the data from both categories. So I should have the data from the healthy heartbeats, and then I need to have the data from the abnormal heartbeats. And then I would try to find the hidden function which maps it to the healthy or non-healthy. And that way I would train the system. But in this one class classification task, these are the methods which allows you to use data only from one category during the training. So for example, if I want to predict the abnormal heartbeats of someone, then why I need the data of the normal one, or vice versa. For example, if I want to predict the abnormal heartbeats, why I need the abnormal heartbeats? I could just use the healthy data of that person and still be able to train the machine learning model. So this is what is called one class classification, that you need the data only from one category. So for example, if I would have to predict if it's a cat or not a cat based on the image, then all I need is either the data of the cats or non-cats, which doesn't belong to the cat category. And this is something considered as one class classification. But of course, then there are many extensions and there are more technical details like the multimodal problem, and also, for example, how these can be extended, like technically how you can improve the methods, how I can identify the subspace for these sort of methods which are well suited for this data to live in that data, and how to merge the data from different modalities for one class classification problem as well. So generally speaking, I mean, binary classification problems in which you have data only from one category available during the training, these kind of problems are tackled by one class classification techniques. And in my PhD thesis, I have been focusing a lot on these methods. But of course, I had some other side works as well, where I tried to identify the patterns of people's happiness in their lives from the emotions by fashion, emotions recognition, and so on and so forth. So I have like a main track in my PhD, but of course, then I had these small works and projects and this kind of small research activities as well.
That's an interesting field. I mean, I don't always get to hear about how one class classification works. It's very interesting to actually listen to. I have more questions about this, but we will come back to that in the end. Let's move on to how all this happened. How did you get into doing a PhD, and what was your background before you started doing the PhD? Did you always know you wanted to do research in this area? How did you prepare for it? Let's talk a little bit about that.
So I have a bachelor's degree in telecommunication engineering. Then I have a master's degree in electronics engineering. And during my master's program, in the first year, I focused thoroughly on the signal processing and not a lot on machine learning side. But then in the second year of my master's, I spent it in TU Delft in Netherlands, where I was kind of introduced to these one class classification methods. And also I took some courses in general, like for machine learning and deep learning and these things. So I was fascinated by the idea overall. But of course, when I started my PhD, then I just didn't use the old methods. I had to enhance the methods or contribute more in the research. So I had a bit of a background, yes, but not exactly like in a very good way, but somehow, yeah, I had the background. And then the group in which I'm doing my research, my professors and my supervisors, they were working on one side track also in this area as well. So it was a good match from both sides. And I started working here. I found the position. I applied. I came here as a doctoral researcher, but then, of course, I was enrolled also in the doctoral program as a PhD student as well.
Got it. All right. So you have a bachelor's in a similar area and a master's, and then you started your PhD.
And continued, yeah. So, I mean, it only went on in a way that I had to focus more on one particular area. So I did not deviate a lot. But of course, in bachelor's, we have to study a lot of other courses, and I could have ended up maybe in a different track as well. But this was more suited for my background in terms of what I did in my master's studies, particularly in my thesis, for example. So it was a continuation from that already.
Did you have any work experience in between degrees?
I worked for a very short time in Germany, very briefly, and I tried to have my own startup as well, which failed. And I kind of contributed in different ways to different companies as a machine learning consultant. So yeah, I spent approximately 1 year after my master's program in the industry or with different companies.
Cool, very cool. But what about publications? Did you prepare for your PhD with publications before you applied?
I had one publication during my master's, and now I have, I think, around 7 publications already in my PhD. So, I mean, it was not required to have publication to apply for the program, but of course, it always helps. So, I think it kind of helped in that way, that it shows the strength that, well, somebody has the experience of doing some sort of research. So it was not very relevant to what I'm doing now, but in a way, the research methodology and like the overall publication helped that the overall profile. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Great. I want to know a little bit about how things work in Finland. I know you've been
Mhm.
around the world quite a bit. You've been studying in the Netherlands, working in Germany. Now you're in Finland.
Mhm.
So, if you're comfortable with answering questions about how to do a PhD in Finland, could you tell us what the requirements are like over there for your program?
Sure. So, I mean, it depends, of course, on quite many things. But here in Finland, being a PhD student and being a doctoral researcher, they can be mutually exclusive also. So, for example, I came here as a doctoral researcher, but then I got enrolled in the program as well. So, one can do it in a way that you're affiliated with the research group, you do the project works, and then, of course, you can form your publications or the thesis out of that.
Mhm.
But for some people, of course, they can just work in some sort of company and they can do it part-time with the university. So there are many different ways. One is like you get a fully funded scholarship from somewhere from the university or from any third party organization, and then you of course contact the professor who is you think is a good match for your profile and your interest, and then you go along. And the other way is that you start working on some sort of project with the professor in the research group, and then if there is a potential that you can do good research and you can form a thesis out of that or have like good enough publications to proceed towards a doctoral degree, then that's also one of the ways. But in my mind, I was clear that I wanted to do a PhD, so I came here as a doctoral researcher, but of course I got enrolled in the program and continued. But I mean, during the period of time, of course, it's not guaranteed that one would work exactly on the same project for all this period of time. It can vary a lot as well. So you might work for all the duration of your PhD on one project. Then, of course, it's possible that your project might be changed from time to time. But of course, the domain, it does not change. I mean, if you're from the machine learning perspective, you would do something similar in the domain. Beside that, there is no strict timeline for that. So, I mean, it's not like that you would spend 3 years and then you're done with your PhD degree or something like that. No, I mean, when your professor thinks that now you have good enough contribution in the topic, then he would just give you a go ahead and you start writing your thesis. The credit requirements, they are very minimal. I think 40 credits are required. So that's not like a big thing to do. I mean, it just comes along the way anyways.
14 credit within the program or before?
40.
Oh, 40, 40.
40, yeah, 40.
That's before applying to the PhD program, correct?
No. That's
Or
like during the PhD. Yeah. Before that, I mean, one must have the master's degree or like the credits which are required usually for any doctoral program. So yeah, that one should have. But during the PhD, one must then finish these 40 credits, and some of them are compulsory. Some of them, of course, you will have a choice to take from here and there, different subjects. But I mean, the main requirement is, of course, the research publications or the articles or the conferences and these kind of things. But for some people, yeah, they would have the possibility also to do this other kind of thesis without appending the publication. So you can also go for the is it called monograph, I guess, one which doesn't require you to have an accepted peer-reviewed publications, but you can also write your dissertation in that way. But that is more, I mean, probably it's kind of unlikely that it will go through,
Hmm.
or,
I
but it's just my
wasn't
opinion, of course. Yeah.
interesting. I wasn't familiar with that. I mean, in my program, we have to come up with 3 publications. I mean, there
Yeah.
was an older version where it's 1
Mhm.
publication, but now it's the
Yeah.
3
Mhm.
paper style that I'm
Yeah.
also following. So
Mhm.
the one that you were talking about where you didn't, a publication is not required. Let's talk a little bit about that. Because it's new information for me. So what do
Mhm.
you do? As in, like, do you do the same sort of research, but you're not really publishing a paper, or is it a different type of research that you're conducting?
I mean, I don't have much in depth, I mean, idea of that, but my assumption is that in that kind of thesis, you would do sort of the same things that you would do for any research article or the conference paper, but you would not publish them in conferences or articles, but you would just keep on accumulating them as a one topic somewhere, connect them like as a one monograph. But the process could still be the same, because then it has to go through the pre-examination, but it might be much more tough to, make it accepted, because it didn't go through the peer review process already, at least like none of it. So in that way, a lot of people, they might prefer it, the other one with the articles, because then you already went through the peer review process for, and I think it's very unlikely that somebody pursuing a PhD career and doing some sort of research would opt for that option.
Yeah.
But at least I've seen it somewhere online that it is also kind of a possibility.
Are there any exams that you have to write before you get into the PhD program? For example, in the United States, some universities require GRE. Are there anything like that over there?
No, not at all. Not in Finland. There are no exams like, I think I've heard something in Turkey also, because I studied for 1 year in Istanbul. That was my home university, Sabancı University. And I remember there, for the PhD, one must go through some sort of exam to just to be considered for like the actual PhD program or something. But in Finland, I haven't seen something like that. Not in my knowledge, no.
Okay, cool. The next question I have is actually about the structure of the program. You talked about this a little bit. You talked about the 40 credits. How many courses is that, by the way? 40 credits.
So, the average course would be something between 3 to 5 credits. So, depending on the course.
Okay.
So a normal course can be like from 3 to 5 credits. But of course, there are like these small, very basic courses which can be like even 1 credit or something. So there are like some of the courses which are compulsory that you must take. But of course, there is, and usually a lot of students, they end up having much more credits than what is required, because getting credit is not a big deal in the PhD program, I think. So, I myself, I have around 72 credits or something already. So,
yeah, you do end up taking more courses than
exactly than actually required. Yeah.
So that would be around the first year that you're taking those courses. What is the structure of the program?
You can, it's very flexible here. So you can choose whenever you want. There's no rush, but at the time of applying for the final degree, or when you are planning your defense or all these sort of things, or like when you're thinking about your dissertation, probably that's the time when your professor would have some sort of talk with you that, okay, do you have enough credits to go forward? So there is no strict deadline. At least in the past, there used to be something for only this one course that it's something called Introduction to Doctoral Studies, I guess. So that one has to be taken in the first year. But beside that, things are very flexible. You can take the courses whenever you want. So you can always schedule them according to your own priorities, or according to your own schedule, or according to the workload. So it's not very strictly defined that you must take this course in this period, or in that semester, or in this year. No.
Okay.
They're flexible. And as there is no strict deadline for finishing the PhD, like in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years, something like that. There might be some maximum limit, but I'm not aware of that. But at least there is no short-term kind of limit defined. So in that way, it's very flexible, because you can, that way you can take them whenever you want.
Got it. Yeah. In my program, within the first year, you take the required courses, and then you have the option to take electives throughout the rest of the course. Then we have something called the comprehensive exam, where you sort of answer 3 questions that the committee gives you, and they're testing your knowledge or your preparation to go ahead with your research proposal and then your research. Do you have something like that in your program?
In the very beginning, when you're applying for the position or to become a doctoral student, yes, there has to be this sort of small, a couple of pages research plan.
Okay.
But of course, that's also slightly flexible in a way that you might not do exactly the precise thing the way you want there. But of course, there has to be some sort of plan and motivation, and some clearly defined things that, well, this is what you want to focus on, or these are the things that are of your interest. So yeah, but that is something very basic, I guess, required in the beginning.
So I guess no comprehensive exam then?
No, not at all. Nothing that I can recall, no.
Cool. All right. Okay, so we talked a little bit about your research and then what the requirements are like in your university in Finland to start a PhD. Let's move on to personal challenges that you faced ever since you started this journey. Would you share some with us if you have any?
Well, yeah, I mean, adapting to the new culture, to the new environment, I think that's among the biggest challenges. The lifestyle, I guess, because it varies a lot, not only from countries, but also from research groups to research groups. So these kind of things, getting familiar with the things in your surrounding. So these are, I think, the very basic challenges. Almost every one of us kind of face them from time to time, especially when you're in the starting phase. So yeah, those were like some of the things for me. Also the cultural shock kind of things at some point. In terms of the technical challenges in the PhD, of course we all deal with that also at certain point in time. I mean, things work out, sometimes things doesn't work out. We get frustrated by the results, sometimes by the negative review, or we get rejections, of course, from conferences, from journals, or this kind of stuff. So there are challenges, but I think they're very common for everyone. So nothing crazy out of the box that I can mention. But yeah, just
Okay.
these small basic things. Yeah, yeah.
All right. What are some country specific issues that you've come across, for example, that could improve to help research in general or PhD students within your university or overall in Finland?
I mean, for Finland, from the university perspective, what could be improved? I don't have a clear answer to that. But in terms of the country as itself, I mean, it's kind of slightly remote from the Central Europe. Also, the weather can be a bit of extreme in the winters. I mean, it's like minus 21 or something probably tonight. But in my experience, I think what I found kind of different in Finland is this very relaxed kind of working environment. Well, it could be just my experience, but also from my colleagues and some of my other friends, I've heard that yeah, it is like this. So if you don't have a self motivation, or if you don't have like your this self driving force to drive you through the things, then probably Finland will slow you down. But of course, on the positive side, then it's good in a way that you are self motivated, you want to do things on your own, and then the kind of the stressful thing is very less. So things are relaxed and easy, and you just go along in that way. So for me, I find it a positive thing, but for some people it could be challenging, because for some people they always need this sort of push that okay, somebody has to tell them what to do, and like okay, I mean, what I like here is it's very relaxed kind of environment in general. So yeah.
Cool. All right. And what about funding? Is that something that every PhD student can easily quite get, or is it very limited? How does it work over there?
I think it again depends on the field. So in some fields probably it's more challenging to get the funding easily.
For your
But
field,
at least
how
I
is
think in our field it's pretty easy. At least I didn't have to struggle for getting any sort of funding. And usually the group, like the professors, they would have some sort of plan for you already. I mean, they would have some sources of funding from different projects. So in that sense, I mean, it's very good. So I didn't have to apply for funding myself, but it is taken care of by the research group in general. And then we have like these different programs where we kind of contribute from time to time, or the research what we do kind of contributes toward those different programs from which the funding is coming to the whole research group. But overall in our field, I think if somebody has a background and want to pursue a career in this domain as a PhD student, then yeah, I wouldn't see any funding issue for that person. But of course, also you have to be competent enough to get the position in that sort of groups. But once you are in the group or you're here, then at least in Finland, funding is not an issue.
Okay, great. Great. All right. So let's move on to hearing some things, some good things that you've experienced during your PhD program. And this stuff could be like, I don't know, support that you've received? Or you touched on this a little bit. The environment, you said, it's very relaxed, so it's a good thing for you. So things like that. What are some of the good things that you've gone through since you started the PhD?
I think my colleagues, they're kind of friends already. So their support and like the discussions we have from time to time, that's what I like it a lot here. In that sense, it's really good. Beside that, not worrying about the funding, that's also like some of the, among the positive things. Also, this kind of very flexible environment of working. There are no like strict deadlines on daily or weekly basis for us. So there are these long-term goals. Sometimes, of course, we have meetings quite regularly and quite often. But this working hours, like it's very flexible. Sometimes I just work at night. At times I work in daytime. I can decide on my own that when I want to focus. And also this remote sort of working, it helps a lot in a way that I don't really have to go to the office. The flexibility to work from different places and at different timings. This is what I like it here. But it also kind of used to be before Corona, at least in our group, for the flexibility in terms of the timings.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you if that's something that was there before COVID.
Also that, yeah, exactly. So
yeah, something.
But also it depends on the nature of the work. For me, all I need is a good internet, my laptop, and that's it, I guess. So
yeah,
it depends on that as well. And also, Finland is among the happiest. No, it is the happiest country on planet Earth. So why not?
Is it?
That also helps. Yeah, it is.
Oh, I can imagine how the flexibility around the work schedule can really contribute to that. I've had experiences where I had to fight to actually attend meetings from home. Sometimes I've lost it. I've had to travel to campus for 2-3 hours for a 20-minute meeting.
Yeah.
Of course, that's going to affect your happiness. So I'm really glad to hear that you have such a nice work environment. And cool. Okay, so I want to get back to your research topic. Let's take a step back and talk about what you want to do for the world with your research. You gave us an example with identifying people with normal heartbeat versus a normal heartbeat. And that's a contribution that you're making in healthcare. So what is your research doing? Are you focusing on improving healthcare, or is it something else? That's what I mean by the question.
Yeah, what I'm trying to do is develop some sort of generic methods. This healthcare and all these other examples, they were sort of applications of what I've been developing over the past couple of years. So I developed very generic methods which could be applied to different domains. And yes, in the long term, I would be very happy if some of these methods are applied in the healthcare system or in hospitals, for example, or for the well-being of humans in general. Of course, they can be applied to many other things as well, as I mentioned, like in the banking sector or in general, like any sensory, multi-sensor data kind of environment. But it would give me more satisfaction in the long term if it is applied for the well-being of people in general. Yeah.
Great. And could you talk a little bit about existing gaps in your field, if you've come across any?
Yeah, for now, what I'm doing is that applying all my methods on a very small scale data sets, not big ones. So of course, there is a need of finding out different methods which can make these methods faster in a way that they could be applied to some sort of bigger data sets. That's one of the things that can be done in the future. Beside that, there is always a gap of, improving the overall accuracy, like contributing in some way to formulate the problem in a different way or find out the solution to the formulated problem in a different way. So at least in machine learning or in these kind of areas, it's very hard to achieve 100% perfect accuracy in the test set, because you want to create a model or train a model that would do better during the test set on the data which it has not seen before, or it should adapt to that kind of circumstances for which it was trained, but it had not seen it during the training or at the time when it was built in. So these sort of challenges, there is always room for improvement, for improving the accuracy on standard data sets or formulating the problem in a different way, formulating the kind of deducing the solution in a different way. So there are these gaps all the time. Of course, there is always like this multimodal kind of issue that sometimes you have the data available in different modalities, how to fuse them in one space. We have done some work in that domain as well, but of course that can be improved and can be taken to the next level as well. Also, there are these ethical issues in this kind of area as well. And we have a lot of challenges with if we want to collect the data from the healthcare systems. So also I would see them, I see them as research gaps that transforming the knowledge to someone who doesn't really understand what we are doing is also like a big challenge for us. And then when we ask for collecting some sort of data, then all these privacy issues or the ethical issues that I mentioned, how to deal with them, because the person on the other hand who is going to approve this sort of thing, he doesn't have an idea of what exactly is going on. So this explainability of the methods that we develop in this domain for someone who thinks of it as just a black box, that okay, you have a method and you do something. So there are quite many challenges, but of course, then there are people who are working on all these challenges on different tracks and in their domains. So yeah.
Yeah, you touched on a good point, knowledge translation. I mean, I can see how that is quite a big challenge, especially in your area, because not everyone's using these terms and one class classification, machine learning. And that within that area, you really have to sit down and understand. Okay, what are you talking about? And then the researcher has to really explain it well, so anyone can understand it. And that's something that I'm working towards too, even in public health. And one of the goals of this show is to actually do that as well. But I definitely see how there's a gap within the field itself, translating knowledge from researchers to ethics committees and then policymakers and decision makers. It happens in public health too. Great. Okay. Just out of curiosity, how big is your data set? That's just from curiosity.
I don't have one data set. I think I might have. I don't remember exactly like how,
like just around
many numbers of, but for some of the methods I used like a couple of hundreds of samples.
Okay.
But then I have like this one paper in which there were like in a couple of thousands.
Okay.
So it varies kind of a bit, but then it can also be much more than that. Like for example, in this one work, we asked the participants to record their data, like their facial expressions from morning to when they would just leave the office, and they recorded for many days like that. And then if you have a data of like, I don't know, even 1 hour, and in 1 hour you have then 60 multiplied by 60 seconds, and if 1 second is like if you have 30 frames per second, and if you do it for 1 day and then multiply it by, I don't know, if it's for example for 7 days. So in that case, then I had a hell lot of data and I had a lot of participants and I had to analyze it. So for the standard data sets, which are used by many researchers for evaluating their methods, then of course I just take them the way they are. They can be very small. So as I said, like there's no fixed number for that I can say that, well, these numbers. So very small ones, like tens or hundreds of samples. Then of course thousands of samples, and then sometime recording through the days and days and days. So but of course the papers are available online, and if somebody's interested in finding out the exact number, well,
yeah, and I just wanted to get an idea. Great. Okay. The next question is, do you have a balance in life as a PhD candidate or PhD student, and how do you maintain a balance?
Yeah, good question. So I mean, it varies a lot. I mean, at times I would have a very good balance. Yeah, I mean, things would go just fine. I would have like my working time, then I have the my time or like the things I want to do beside my research. And then there are those days or weeks or sometimes months that it's just super hard to detach yourself from the work that you're doing, and then all you do is like work, and even if you're not working, then you're still kind of thinking about those things. So I mean, normally, yeah, it's hard to detach myself from the work, but how I do it, I try to play different games. I play badminton. I do some running or jogging, and in summertime play football. Just hang out with friends and try to keep like some sort of activity on daily basis beside the work things, and that kind of helps in maintaining some sort of good balance. But yeah, I agree that it's not very trivial to just detach yourself from the work and find this kind of balance, but yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, I think we're a bit alike when it comes to that. For me too, it's like sometimes it's like a great balance and you feel really proud. And then the
Yeah,
next week is just like, oh, well, I've been just sitting here for hours. What's going on?
yeah,
Or days.
yeah,
And it's
yeah.
hard to detach. And sometimes it's okay if you feel that way, because
Hmm.
if you detach yourself from the work, you do sort of forget where you left things off, at
Hmm.
least for
Yeah.
me. So I like to push through and get that done with when I'm in that zone. We're at the end of the interview. What is one advice you would give to future and current PhD students?
Uh-huh. To current PG students, just go through it. I mean, you will make it through. So almost there, push it hard. And for someone who wants to do PhD, I mean, it's an amazing journey. Go for it. There might be difficulties. I mean, there are challenges all the time, but of course, the end goal when you're done with that, or when you're getting closer to the goal, when you have some sort of publication, I mean, that satisfaction that cannot be described. So all the challenges aside, but when you contribute towards something and it kind of creates this sort of impact, that helps a lot. So these, but to have these kind of feelings, of course, one have to go through all this process. And for the to be PhD students, I mean, go for it. It's amazing. And for the ones who are already here, just a bit of more push and you're almost there.
I agree. Thank you so much, Fahad. That's really valuable advice, and I'm taking it too. I'm already here, and I just have to push through. Thank you
Almost
so
there.
much.
Yeah.
Almost,
You're
yeah.
welcome. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time off your busy
You're
schedule
welcome.
to be here with us today and tell us all about your experience and share some great advice. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and I hope you learned something today from this video. Until next time, bye bye. Take care.